Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vin Panzini, Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce. It's a great morning when we can get this many people to Santilli Circle and here on time. So thank you for coming out at this early hour. We will end up meeting promptly at 9 o'clock so you can get back to your offices. We appreciate you coming out today to our annual business breakfast. At this point, I'd like to bring up Rob Dollard, the Managing Director of BNY Mellon, who's been gracious enough every year to sponsor this event. Rob?
Good morning, everyone. And as someone who has to get through Santilli Circle every morning and evening, I'm glad that you're recognizing the challenges. So my name is Bob Dollard. It's a pleasure to welcome you to BNY Mellon this morning. We're proud to be hosting this morning's event in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. As one of the area's largest employers, BNY Mellon is continually drawing from the talent and resources available in Everett and surrounding towns. BNY Mellon, BNY Mellon is an engaged member of the business community. We recognize the difference we can make as a good corporate citizen, and we will continue to work with the many groups in and around the city that make Everett a great place to live and work. Of course, sorry. All right, with that, let me just thank you for joining us this morning, and especially to the Chamber for the opportunity to host this important event. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. At this time, I'd like to bring up David LaRavia, President of the Chamber, to bring his greetings.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here at our Government Affairs Breakfast. I'd like to thank Mellon Bank for hosting. I'd especially like to thank them for hosting because, Vin, I did not have to go through Santilli Circle. I just had to drive down Oak Street and Towson Street, and I was right here, so thank you very much. Thank you to Russell Berg for coming as our guest speaker. We always have a lot of great discussion here, but today's topic is very local and very important to the business community. Thank you to all of our city's leadership for being here. Out of respect for our agenda today, I won't mention you all by name because Vin Panzini will, but I do just want to say that the support that the Chamber receives from the City of Everett and the Everett Public Schools is tremendous. The new mentoring program at Everett High School is a big example of that. Lastly, I'd like to just thank our Executive Director, Cheryl Smith, for all of her hard work. Thank you for coming and enjoy your breakfast.
I want to welcome, I think our state representative should be here shortly, Superintendent Forrester and his staff, well represented this morning. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to bring up our Mayor, Carlo Di Maria, to welcome you.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all this morning. What a terrible, traffic was terrible this morning coming down towards Mellon Bank. But the future of Everett, as we know it, soon it will be a place where you're able not to use your vehicle anymore. Where our city, you can envision rapid bus lines connecting to Civil Line stops and commuter rail stations and bike paths that will connect you to Assembly Road T stations, and that's all within reach. If you can remember, it might have been 8 years ago where I spoke about that Lower Broadway master plan and how people thought we were nuts, that we wanted to clean up Lower Broadway and clean up that Monsanto site. And as you all know, what is happening with that whole entire area, and which will continue to happen, trust me, that will continue to happen. That will be open soon in May. But it's stuff. It's like you hear from Russ Burke today. It's really about visioning and planning, which is very important to do as a community. If you don't have, they say, if you don't make plans, plan to fail, or something to that effect, right? So if you don't have, you can have all the great ideas in your head, but if you don't write them, get them down on paper, and get the experts in to really, and get the residents, because really, when we started that whole Lower Broadway Master Plan exercise, it was the residents who really talked about what they wanted to see, what changes they wanted to see in Everett. And people now are talking about traffic, right? They're talking about congestion. They're talking about, they don't want to really have to use their car to get to work. They want to use a reliable transit opportunity, a reliable system to get into work, and that's what we want to provide here in Everett. And that's what we're working with Stantec and Nelson Nygaard right now, and Wynn is working with AECom to really connect the city of Everett to the city of Boston. So if we can do that, we can really have a great place. And we do have a great place that we're living in and working in, but we really can make life a lot easier for our businesses and our residents. You're going to hear about that from Russ today. I want to thank Vin and the Chamber for holding this morning, and Cheryl and the entire group of Chamber, and Colin and all of you for what you do here in the city of Everett. It's nice to, you look around the room, it's everyone from the city, from the police, the fire, the schools, different departments in the city, and you look at some of the great business owners here. And most of you are passionate about the success of the city. And I want to thank you all for your caring and commitment to our community. New companies like NBI who decided to relocate here. And there's two young men here, I think, in the back there, who are now developing an app for Everett residents to be able to get food delivery to their home. Right? What is the name of the company? What is it? Relus. So there'll be a new app that you'll be able to. Fred, that you'll be able to use your iPhone and get your pizza delivered from wherever you want to your home, from any pizza place in the city of Everett. I mean, it's stuff like that it's amazing. So many opportunities, and I want to wish you two great success. I know we're going to be meeting soon in the next week or so, but it's nice to see so many young people getting involved in the entrepreneurial spirit. And again, I want to thank Mellon. Did I thank Mellon for hosting us this morning? As you know, the city of Everett has had a long relationship with Mellon Bank, and we hope to continue that. Did you renew your lease with Gilbane? Is that done? Is that a done deal yet? It's still happening? Okay, we don't want to see you leave. But if you do decide to leave, I think I might have someone to replace you. No, I'm just kidding. But you'll want to stay here, because right in your backyard, this GE parkland. If you have any extra money, you want to buy some parcels of land, here's a spot you want to buy. As Russ will tell you, all our bike paths will connect to the T stations here, and Wynn is relocating Line Street Park down here. Did you all know that? I'm sure most of you knew that. Line Street Park will be relocated right here on the Malden River. Working with National Grid now to connect all the bike paths along the Malden River. It's really going to be a wonderful area to really to recreate. We had a great cleanup, and I want to thank Snitzer, actually one of our corporate partners who helped us out at the cleanup on Saturday. We had so many great companies that helped us, and they stepped up big time. We had anyone here go to the cleanup? Yeah, a few of you. Well, maybe next year we'll get this whole group here. Then maybe Vin Panzini will help me, and Cheryl will help me get the entire chamber to come down to the cleanup. We had about 500 people at the cleanup. It was truly a wonderful day. We did the whole northern bike strand from the Madeline English School down to West Street. And as you know, from West Street, we are now designing the bike path under Santilli to the hopeful new T-stop that Wynn is modeling. So we're going to connect the city so if you're down at 66 Main Street or you're down at the GE Parkland, you'll be able to walk on a bike path to an Assembly Road T station or the new T-stop that will get future Civil Line extension, right? So I'm going to the opening of the Civil Line in Chelsea today. The next stop is Everett, all right? And the next stop for the Purple Line is also going to be in Everett. So a lot of great things happening in just this area of Everett. So if you own some property, 2 families on Prescott or wherever it is, buy more, because it's going to just go up in value. Other than that, I don't want to take up too much time, because I know Russ has a detailed, a lot of good things that he's doing, and I'm sure you'll want to hear about it. So again, have a great day, and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now I know why you had a motive last week to clean up that bike path. Apparently you and I are going to be driving our bike up and down there, riding it. Good. Our next speaker is a fascinating guy. I had the opportunity a couple of months ago to listen to about a 1-hour presentation from him. And it was the first time in my somewhat long life that I saw a complete vision for the entire city of Everett. I mean, there's been a lot of great things happening over the last 8 years, but this tied it all together, and the focus on Everett Square and the business district was of particular importance to myself and to the Chamber, and we thought that everybody should get this message from Russ. Russ is the Director of Planning with the BSC Group. He has been working, he was responsible for doing the plan, the urban renewal plan for Lower Broadway, and we know what that turned into, and he's now working on the Upper Broadway plan, Commercial Triangle, and River's Edge. So a fascinating speaker, and he's going to give his presentation, and when you see the vision of the city he has, and the mayor and his staff, you'll walk away feeling even brighter about the future of our city. Russ?
Good morning, everyone. Make sure I get this correct. All right, well, that's the hardest part of my presentation, getting it on the screen. Thank you very much for inviting me. As the mayor and Vinnie indicated, I've been working with the city of Everett for the past several years, doing primarily urban renewal plans, starting with the Lower Broadway urban renewal plan. We're currently in the middle of working on the Everett Square urban renewal plan, and we're just commencing work on the Commercial Triangle urban renewal plan. So I was after we gave a public forum for the Everett Square urban renewal plan, we had a follow-up focus group type meeting with the Chamber just to get more input on the business community perspective for Everett Square. And after that, I was approached and asked if I would be the keynote speaker for this event, which I'm very flattered and honored to be the speaker. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, well, gee, we really like the presentation you gave at the forum. Could you do something like that? And I thought, well, that gets really project specific, and I thought it could get bogged down in the weeds a little bit. And so then I gave some thought and thought, well, jeepers, we have all this talk about urban renewal, and one of the things that we always run into when we do urban renewal plans is the imagery that those two words evoke, urban renewal. And for many people it has some negative connotations, and deservedly so. So I thought I'd like to start out our meeting, or my presentation this morning, with an overview of urban renewal. Take you down memory lane as you would a historic perspective on urban renewal, just so you get a feel for what it is, how it was created, how it's evolved, and how it operates today. Then I'd like to just pivot and start speaking about urban renewal, how it relates with the city of Everett, and get into some specifics with respect to some of the areas in Everett that are or could benefit through the urban renewal process. So with that, we'll start. Oops, let's try this. Okay, before we begin, I just want to, the photo on the right, we have a saying, 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon. Has everybody heard of that? It means that if you meet somebody, you can probably work your way through 6 other people back to Kevin Bacon. Tonight, I think we can do it, this morning, I think we can do it much shorter time. The photo on the right shows 3 gentlemen looking over a model of Philadelphia. The fellow in the middle, his name is Edmund Bacon. He was the person in charge of Philadelphia's urban renewal history. He happens to be Kevin Bacon's father, little factoid. So we have one degree of separation from Kevin Bacon. Okay, I'm going to rely on my crib notes so I don't overlook any important factoids. Urban renewal owes its origin to the perceived conditions known as slums and blight. Slums were viewed in a social context, whereas blight was viewed in economic terms. Slums often occurred in areas, urban locations, occupied by economically disadvantaged and sometimes minority populations. Urban renewal was based on the notion that the clearance of slums was a public purpose, and that public housing, affordable housing, was a goal that should be achieved. And this was happening in the time of the late 20s, early 30s, where city planning was starting to emerge and take roots in the United States. Back in the 1920s is when zoning first started coming online, and the landmark decision, Euclid versus Amber, was decided by the Supreme Court. This is a chronology. This slide shows a chronology of sort of the major public policy initiatives that shaped urban renewal. There was an ongoing dichotomy between forces who championed affordable housing and those who championed economic development or real estate interests. The 1949 Housing Act was the first that created urban renewal, and it was later replaced by the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, which basically constituted the federal government's exit from the urban renewal realm. I talked earlier about the dichotomy and the tension between the housing interest and the real estate interest. And an interesting factoid, the Massachusetts, the governing law for urban renewal is called Mass General Laws, Chapter 121B. And it says urban renewal can only be undertaken by a urban renewal agency, and those agencies can be one of two entities, a housing authority or a redevelopment authority. To my knowledge, I don't think Massachusetts has had any urban renewal plans undertaken by housing authorities. However, in other parts of the country, they were the lead. But that is a testament to the dichotomy that existed between the two factors. You can see from this slide the interest and the interest of each of these organizations. The Boston West End, for people in the Boston area, and those of you who are old enough may remember the West End of Boston. It was a classic example of old-style urban renewal where massive clearance was the approach. It was a working-class neighborhood comprised of buildings similar to what we see in the North End. It did not conform to what then was the vision planners had, which was considered more suburban, auto-oriented post-World War II. And this area was considered by those standards to be blighted or a slum, despite the fact that it had a very strong, cohesive social network. But due to its proximity to transit, downtown, river views, it was viewed as prime real estate. And as a result, the development interest won out, and it resulted and widespread displacement of the residents and the businesses of that community. These two slides show on the left the West End before, and on the right the West End afterwards. Just to orient you, on the foreground is the Charles River, the Esplanade, the swimming pool, and Mass General Hospital is located right there. Hotel Madison, the old North Station. And this is what happened to the West End, completely razed. Picture before, and this is what it became. You may recognize when you drive down Storrow Drive and before you get to the Leverett Circle, no relation to the Santilli Circle, the signs that say, if you lived here, you'd be home now. And I think those signs are still there to this day. And you see them copied every once in a while at other locations. Urban renewal gave rise to growing public skepticism. These are a couple of editorial cartoons that started popping up, depicting the urban renewal as a monster or a big wrecking ball. Urban renewal also had in the past a record of disregard for historic and architecturally significant buildings. The Housing Act of 1949 was passed with the predominantly residential provision. That was basically the political justification that the urban renewal legislation needed to allow the clearance and the acquisition of property and sale to private entities as being deemed a public purpose. It turned out this was a loophole that was rarely observed. The prevailing attitude was that people displaced would be able to find suitable housing elsewhere in better neighborhoods, which didn't happen. And little concern was given towards the social upheaval and inadequate relocation assistance that accompanied urban renewal in those days. Mixed income housing, social economic justice were not part of the planning lexicon. There was a prevailing attitude towards affordable housing that if they were going to if they want affordable housing, if they want to eat for free, let them eat off a dirty plate, which is kind of a shameful attitude of that day. This gave rise to community opposition, and it led to citizens starting to resist urban renewal, the displacement, the forced relocation of their homes and their businesses. These are a couple of photos from the West End. I think the building on the right stood there in testament of defiance for many years, right near Causeway Street. I don't know if it's still there. My understanding is it belonged to a relative of a then Boston City Councilor, and that gave some leverage in terms of avoiding the demolition of that building. Here are some on-the-ground pictures of the clearance of Boston's West End. The West End was not the only place that saw massive clearance. The picture on the left is Scully Square, which is now the location of City Hall Plaza, Government Center. The little T-stop you see on the left is now the Government Center T-stop. And on the bottom right is a picture showing now City Hall Plaza, the City Hall building. up where Government Center Plaza was the location of the old Howard Theater. It was a burlesque theater that was popular. In later days, the Scully Square became the predecessor to what then was known as the Combat Zone in Boston, which got transferred to Washington Street. But the whole area was essentially bulldozed, and now it's the concrete open space that we see today. City Hall Plaza, again, the demolition. You got the Kennedy Building in the background. Boston City Hall. Everybody has an opinion of City Hall. I will just leave it at that. And as a result of this growing public opposition, it started a more formalized reconsideration of urban renewal. Jane Jacobs was a woman who embodied public opposition to urban renewal as it was practiced. She challenged the basic premises of urban renewal and of planning itself. I'll make a confession. She wrote a book called The Life and Death of the Great American City. It was after reading that book that I decided I wanted to get into city planning as a profession. Strangely, it was a book that pretty much trashed all of what city planning was doing up until that point. But she, as a woman without any formal education, was way ahead of her time in understanding how cities work and applying that knowledge to advocating, at the time, revolutionary concepts that we now have embraced. She was famous in her opposition to Robert Moses, who was the architect of urban renewal in the city of New York, and had many famous battles opposing many of his initiatives, and also posed the same challenges to Ed Logue in Boston, I previously mentioned Ed Bacon in Philadelphia, Albert Cobo in Detroit, and Justin Herman in San Francisco, who were some of the captains of urban renewal back in the 60s. Jane Jacobs is sometimes credited with being the savior for Boston's North End, because after the West End, which physically had many of the same characteristics as the West End, planners were starting to think of it in terms of slums and blighted, and a target for urban renewal. Jane Jacobs stepped in and suggested that the North End, as it remains today, a very viable, socially cohesive area, is not a slum, it's not blighted, and it should be left alone. And she prevailed, which I think was a very smart move and benefited Boston in many ways. This started to take roots in other cities. This is a headline. I apologize for the poor quality, but the headline itself, I think, speaks volumes. The city of Salem back in the 60s embarked on an urban renewal plan for their downtown and decided that their goal was not massive clearance, but strategic spot clearance when necessary, but looked more towards rehabilitation, historic preservation. And today, downtown Salem is really a thriving, vibrant downtown, particularly around Halloween. But even off Halloween, it's a very interesting downtown. It has some pedestrian-only ways that have been embraced by the business community as well as the patrons. I think this slide says it all. Downtown Detroit, nothing changed and everything changed. And I think that typifies how urban renewal is now being applied. and it's created, it represents the paradigm shift that we've seen with urban renewal. Examples, in downtown Pittsburgh, we have a corner mixed-use business building that's been basically restored from before to the after on the right. We're all familiar with Quincy Market. I remember when I was in college and you went down to Quincy Market in the late 60s. There was still some produce businesses there, but the place was mostly vacant. It was ramshackled, rat infested. It was not a pleasant place to be. Boston was fortunate that the Rouse Company came forward with a plan for restoring Quincy Market, and today it is a major gathering spot, a point of vitality and vibrancy that's helped the rebirth with the city of Boston. This is a project we worked on, an urban renewal plan in the city of Gardner. The building on the left, a former mill building, was part of the Haywood Wakefield furniture factory. The building on the left had a fire. The facade that you see in that picture was in danger of falling in on the street. The city worked very hard with the then property owner to preserve that. They did not want to see the facade fall down. They worked to shore it up. A developer came along and redeveloped and reused the building. It's now an assisted living facility, and it's now a very fine-looking building, but it represents the type of rehabilitation and restoration work that we can see with urban renewal these days. This is in the same city. In the picture on the left, you see some selected demolition of old industrial buildings on site that was contaminated through years of no regulations whatsoever. And the buildings in the background, you see in the picture on the right, have been restored to apartment buildings with retail. This is the back of the building. They have retail on the first floor on the other side of the properties. I think you might be familiar with this property. This is a building that's under construction on a former chemical industrial site that had years of environmental disregard, shall we say. I was looking at a documentary that was done a couple of years ago about the down the line neighborhood, and it said if you from the line you have sniffed sulfur at some point during your life, and I think that spoke of the heavy industrial chemical use that went on at this site. This is also a project that's in the Lower Broadway urban renewal area. The urban renewal plan cannot take credit. This was a project that was under construction when the urban renewal planning process started, but it does represent the type of interest, growing interest, that we're starting to see in the Everett Market area. And as the mayor mentioned, public engagement and visioning and listening to what the public wants is a very important process, not only in planning in general, but urban renewal plans in particular. Urban renewal plans have a long-term lifespan. They have a great deal of impact in the community, and you need to get it right for two reasons. One, if you don't get it right, the likelihood of getting the plan approved and getting buy-in from the public and the business community is not very good. And secondly, the plan will probably be based on poor foundations. And in Everett, this is a couple slides of public hearings that we've had with the city on various urban renewal projects. The power of urban renewal plans. I like to talk about the power of urban renewal plans because oftentimes, once the city or the community embarks on an urban renewal plan, things start to happen. It's really an indication that the municipality has skin in the game. They have gone through the effort of taking a close look at an area, have identified what their vision is with the community's input for that area. It's a long-term plan. The city identifies the resources that would be brought to bear, some public, some private, and it creates an incentive for the public sector to step up and, in some cases, do the work that the city intended to do itself. And it also provides relocation benefits for any persons who are displaced, be that residents or businesses. And that's something that's very important, and that's something that Mayor DeMaria has seized upon as well. That if urban renewal takes place, he wants to be sure that people who are possibly being displaced or businesses that are being displaced have the necessary resources for relocation. We like to call out the if not clause when we're doing urban renewal plans. When you do your urban renewal plan, you have to get it approved by the state. And one of the things they ask is, what is the, how does this plan, if not for this plan, why wouldn't things be accomplished? So it's basically utilized to, urban renewal plans are utilized when can be demonstrated that the public sector, the private sector in and of itself cannot get done what needs to be done. And that can be due to fragmented ownership. You have irregular or small lot sizes. You have buildings that are functionally obsolete. The floor plates don't match what current businesses want. You have severe substandard conditions, and there are development constraints, be it soil conditions, poor drainage, et cetera. And so urban renewal plans need a justification why they're being proposed for certain areas, and the state looks very closely at that. Now I want to talk about property assemblage because that is probably two words that most accompany urban renewal are eminent domain. And we have public hearings. Whenever we do an urban renewal plan, the first thing we have to explain is what about a property assemblage? So when you do an urban renewal plan, you have to identify a boundary for the area. And in that area is where the plan proposes to do all the work that it anticipates. And some of it's redevelopment, but some of it is infrastructure, public improvements, things above the ground, some things below the ground, sewer, water, drainage, traffic, etc. So not all properties in an urban renewal area are targeted for acquisition. And not all acquisitions require eminent domain. When a property is identified as an acquisition target in an urban renewal area, it allows the city, acting through its redevelopment authority, the ability to act on a level playing field with the private sector. That is, it is not bound by public procurement, Chapter 30B. They can go to somebody and say, we're interested in purchasing your property. Are you interested in selling? They can do a transaction without going through eminent domain. On the flip side, when they do have property that's been acquired, or even if it's city property that's been transferred to the redevelopment authority can go to market with that property and not be subject to public bidding procedures, which can be a very cumbersome, awkward, and sometimes unsuccessful way of marketing property that you want to see development. It allows the redevelopment authority to negotiate with a developer. If, for example, you want to have a master developer to implement something, the redevelopment authority has that ability to do that. And I might add that the city of Everett has been very cognizant of property rights when it comes to urban renewal. That eminent domain is something that would only, if ever used, be something of a last resort. But it is nonetheless something that does come with urban renewal plans. But it's not the blunt instrument that's been applied in the past, where you see the massive clearing that we previously looked at on the West End. So, how does this all relate to Everett? And I want to now pivot and start talking about Everett, a little bit about the market, sort of my shoot from the hip perceptions of what I see happening in the marketplace, and then how it applies to some of the areas that we have been focusing on with urban renewal planning efforts. The city has not been on the main radar screen for developers or brokers. When you look at the commercial brokerage listings, CoStar is sort of an MLS service for commercial property. Everett does not have a lot of listings in that book. You see it more in Boston and Cambridge. You see it in suburban markets, Burlington, Waltham, etc. Everett is just starting to get onto their radar screen. The demand for housing and high land costs in the urban areas has basically brought developer attention across the river into Everett. The casino, I don't think I'm saying anything new, but it has just created a whole new dynamic in the city's economy. The extent of that still is to be determined, but we're starting to see it already with certain actions by the casino people and acquisitions that they're making. This is going to create increased demand for housing, lodging, services, and public amenities. Access and traffic issues loom large. Now, when I was putting this presentation together, I was thinking, yeah, traffic and access is an important issue, but I not only had to deal with Santilli Circle, but I had to deal with the Concord Rotary coming in, as well as Alewife and Alewife Brook Parkway and Mystic River Parkway. So traffic is a huge issue, not only for Everett, but every metropolitan area. We're just building stuff higher and higher with greater density. The automobile is no longer going to be the faithful chariot that can get us in a timely fashion from one place or another. And Mayor DeMaria, I think, is quite visionary in his outlook in terms of the importance of alternatives to the automobile. I think 10, 20 years from now, we're going to see quite a different model in terms of urban traffic. I think we're going to see more utilization of autonomous vehicles. I think mass transit is going to have to be more robust than it is. It's interesting that in the Boston area, the most densely populated communities, Somerville, Chelsea, Everett, have long been the forgotten areas for mass transit. Somerville, back in the 60s, basically forced Davis Square to get a station when the Red Line was being extended, and that's the only mass transit that the city of Somerville, which is the most densely populated city in New England. Everett and Chelsea have now been pushing for more mass transit, and we'll see how that plays out. The other thing I'd like to note is the city has, over the past decade, I think, dramatically, substantially increased its capacity to manage growth and for capital improvements. I think the city, with the charter reforms, where you went from the only bicameral legislative municipal body to a single city council, with a mayor with a 4-year term. I think 2-year terms for strong mayors are disasters for communities, and many communities have mayors with 2-year terms, which I think is not enough for a chief executive to really make an imprint on their community. And just the attention that the city is starting to place in capital improvements, public realm improvements, planning, I think is very important. These are some of the recent developments in the pipeline. I won't read through them all. I think you all know that there's a lot of developments that are occurring and on the drawing board. These are just a few of them. The transportation improvements, dedicated bus lane for AM, water ferry service. The city's talking about direct shuttle service from the Everett Square to Wellington and Sullivan Square. The mayor alluded to the connection to the Northern Strand bike path. Broadway in downtown is going to be going through some streetscape improvements. Greater public access along the Mystic River, I think are all important projects in the works. The Lower Broadway area was an area that had a master plan completed before Wynn came on the scene. And it was just as we were being hired to do the urban renewal plan that the Wynn interest manifest itself. And that created somewhat of a change. I think a lot of the master plan, earlier master plan that was done without the benefit of knowledge of the Wynn Casino still remained relevant, but the timetable and the catalytical effect that the Wynn Casino proposal had was unanticipated, and I think it's a real opportunity for creating a dynamic farther-line neighborhood. You previously saw development already occurring in that area with the backyard and other multifamily development, traffic improvements, and we're going to be seeing additional traffic improvements with the pedestrian Mystic River crossing and Mystic River public access that would connect hopefully up with the Strand bike trail. This picture of the casino, this was taken early fall of this year, so I think the casino's a few stories higher than it's showing in that picture. The Commercial Triangle is an area that we have just started a urban renewal plan process. This falls on the heels of a recently completed master plan for this area. It's an area that has already some development activity as evidenced by recent approvals for multifamily development. It is also an area that is being targeted for resiliency and stormwater management. There are stormwater flooding issues as well as some aging tidal floodgate infrastructure that needs to be addressed. But we're also seeing in that area some what I call organic economic development taking place. You have the restaurant depot, you have the Envision Hotel. So you are seeing already on its own indications of economic development potential in that area. This is a plan that just shows some of the developments that are presently permitted. We have, that's in Chelsea, you have the Boston Road development. This is the former Harley-Davidson site, both proposed for multifamily development. You have the Envision Hotel, and you also have the Market Forge property that's been recently cleared and hopefully someday being readied for some redevelopment. The river's edge, there's been a lot of activity on the Malden side, basically started way back when Tufts located a boathouse for their crew team, and that really stimulated a whole massive redevelopment on that side of the river. Now it's Everett's turn to take advantage of the potential this area poses. You've already seen some organic economic development occurring here with the rise of Night Shift Brewery, which is an economic success story. They not only have a brewery, an eating place, but they've also established a distribution business. And I was just reading in the paper they're going to be opening a downtown location, downtown Boston. Well, it'd be nice to get them into downtown Everett, but that will be next. But this is an area that has great development potential and is not currently being under study as an urban renewal plan, but I would not be surprised if that does not happen sometime in the future. These are just some photos. You have the Wellington Apartments, Teddy Peanut Butter, the aforementioned Night Shift Brewery, as well as the Northern Strand Bike Path. Everett Square, we're right in the middle of putting together a plan for Everett Square. As you know, it's the historic and current nexus of civic and commercial activity in Everett. It owes its existence to a time before the automobile rose to prominence, which means it is very walkable, pedestrian friendly. It physically has many of the attributes communities are looking for in their downtown, that you have a concentration of residences, a density of residences that are in walking distance to your downtown. The things I'm impressed with your downtown are the vitality that you see on the streets. There are always activity on the streets. You have a very few vacancies on the first floor. The businesses are predominantly local entrepreneurs, be it local convenience retailers, service providers, professional service providers. The other thing is the quality of the properties. I remarked once to the mayor, I said, I am just pleasantly amazed at the lack of graffiti that you often see in urban areas. And I believe the mayor in the city has been very aggressive in trying to minimize those types of quote-unquote minor crimes, but yet very important in terms of setting a tone for the area. I think you have about 15,000 vehicle trips passing on Upper Broadway every day. And with that, you would think you would have much more traffic, business as a result of that traffic. But it creates a perceived parking shortage, despite the fact a parking study has been done showing that there's most of the off-street and on-street parking, there's about an 80% availability at any given time during the day. There's a mindset that people have, and I'll digress a little bit, but when you're in a downtown area, be it Everett Square or any downtown area, people have a different mindset when it comes to parking and convenience. If you can't park in front of your building or across the street from the building where you want to go, I can't find a parking spot. If you go to the mall, you go to the Burlington Mall, or you go to Meadow Glen, you'll park way down the lot, you'll walk all the way to the mall, and you'll walk through the mall to the other end to go to the store you're going to. You'll probably go 5 or 10 times the distance that you're willing to go for a downtown. But people have this mindset that when you're in a downtown, if you can't get a parking space right in front of where you're going, there's no parking. And I think that's something that Everett Square and many downtowns have to overcome. And there are ways of addressing that through wayfinding, better strategic placement of parking, but also creating greater mass transit opportunities. These are some slides that we had done as just what we called a test fit for development. And one of the focal points in Everett Square is the intersection of Norwood Street with Broadway. And this is a look of the existing conditions, looking at the former Bouvier Jeweler building, easy for me to say. And we put together just a rendering of what possibly could happen there. This, of course, would involve some assemblage. We are talking to some of the property owners there and hope to have a meeting shortly to discuss the potential of creating an assemblage that might allow something like this to happen. Individually, without such an assemblage, no one of the property owners can accomplish that, but throwing all the properties together does create an opportunity for a redevelopment that could be quite transformative for the entire Everett Square area. And with that, I didn't leave much time. I went over, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to valiantly try to answer them. And if not, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We'll wrap up. I think you can tell by Rush's has a deep knowledge of urban renewal. Presentation a little different than I expected this morning, but with his knowledge of urban renewal and the mayor's passion and vision that he has for the city, one of the takeaways I had early on was the signs that said, if you've lived here, you'd be home now. We've been looking at those signs for years. I think at some point those signs will come down to Lower Broadway and come to Everett. And I think the mayor's sign would say something like, if you lived here, you'd stay here. Because I know his vision. There isn't a time you talk to the mayor that he isn't talking about a place, an urban location that you want to live in, work in, stay in, shop in, be able to dine, and also, for the first time in many years, have a lot of recreational opportunities. The mayor, many times, I say, is rebuilding this city one brick at a time, and all you have to do is go look at all of our parks to see how he's doing that one brick at a time. So we're on our way. We'll try and get a follow-up video presentation that gets deeper into the vision that we have seen in the past, but I thank you for coming today.